Hi, my name's Sgt Ed Aldredge, and what I remember about 9/11 that morning actually stands out. I think every generation has kind of a defining day or a defining event, and that's my generation's defining event. That morning, I took my daughter to daycare at the Methodist church on Eldridge Road, and on the way home I had the radio on. I was listening to the news, and they had mentioned something about a plane flying into the World Trade Center. But it was really presented more of it had been maybe a civil aviation accident, a small plane. It didn't really register on the radar, kind of an odd thing, but no one was reporting it as an airliner at the time. They started showing pictures, and they showed the pictures of the World Trade Center, and I could see the damage that was inflicted, and it was clear that it's no way it could have been a Cessna or something like that. I remember feeling rage. It really upset me that we had been attacked on our own soil, something that hadn't happened since 1812. Ultimately caused me to re-enter military service after approximately 13 years. I went back in for a short stint, and it's caused me to look at everything differently. I mean, I can't, and really everyone does. If you come and think, if you stop and think about it, everyone looks at everything differently now. Thinking back that day, there really wasn't any coverage that I remember seeing that showed firefighters and police officers. Although I knew that they were there, it was later on that I considered how many people were there, the emergency responders that were there, both on and off duty, and how many of them must have known as they were ascending up while everyone else was trying to get down. Surely they must have known that there was a very good chance that was their last steps up, and they weren't going to take any more steps down. There's no way that they didn't know that, and yet they went forward. And that's something that really kind of sunk in later. It didn't sink in that day. That day, like I said, my overwhelming emotion was rage. And it wasn't until later that I considered the sacrifice that was taking place that day. The best way to honor those that lost, the 3,000 that lost their lives that day, roughly 3,000 that lost their lives that day, is just to remember what we saw. Those of you who are too young to remember this, look at the pictures. Don't just listen to the stories, look at the pictures. On behalf of the Sugar Land Police Department, myself and my fellow officers that serve with me will never forget the sacrifice that police officers and firefighters made that day. And it's our job to honor their memory by remembering their sacrifice.
My name is Trevor Nehls, and I'm the Constable in Fort Bend County, Precinct 4. And it doesn't seem to be that long ago in my mind, about a short 10 years ago, when we experienced such horrific acts here on our American soil with the downing of the two towers. And I can recall, I was out tending to my property outside of Rosenberg, and I was listening to the news, and they would talk about some small aircraft, running into one of the towers in New York. And as the news stories progressed, they said the plane was bigger, and eventually it became to be a jetliner. And I was shocked. I immediately ran over to a neighbor's house and knocked on the door, and he was watching on his television the burning of the towers. And it was just very sad. Terrible, tragic day. Really, I was in complete disbelief. And I think, how could something like this happen here in America? And being in the military, I've recently retired, but being a service member, I said to myself, I feel that this is going to cause war. We are going to have to react and respond to whoever has done this to us. And I wanted to play my role, and I had the opportunity to play my role in 2004 when I was deployed to Iraq. I think it's very important for me personally and for all Americans to sit back and reflect and think about where they were that day and how the world has changed, whether you are a frequent traveler in the airports or just how it has restricted really some of our individual and personal freedoms. People still today are still so very patriotic, and as a former service member, I really appreciate the fact that people will see you and thank you for your service. It's just a testimony to the men and women that wear police and fire uniforms that people traveled from throughout the country, drove up there to try to help out and assist. This has really brought the country together. I think it is tragic as it may be. I think really that it has brought America closer together. Again, I think people are so very patriotic today as a result. For the last few days, I've been watching television, and they've been interviewing a lot of survivors from 9/11 and sharing their horrific stories about what took place that day. If they were in a building or they called in sick that day and they would have been on the 90th floor. And, you just sit back and you get chills thinking that, their life was saved. And then there are others, that share their stories about their loved ones that were killed over there. And your heart goes out to them. And the only thing that we can do now is continue to remember them and pray for them. My name is Trevor Nehls. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. I remember that Tuesday morning clearly. I was teaching a child passenger safety class at Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas. And I recall it being around 8:15 in the morning, and we were informed of the circumstances involving the Twin Towers. We gathered up all our belongings, and we were off that Goodfellow Air Base within 30 minutes. Extremely tragic circumstances with, I believe, over 340 firefighters lost that day, and I believe over 40 policemen within the city of New York, which has had a detrimental impact on the fire and police departments in New York City. But I think if this would happen once again in that fine city in New York, I would predict to you that the New York City Fire Department, the firefighters, and professional police would climb a building once again to save those that are trapped as a result of their duty and dedication and loyalty to their job. Don't necessarily look at the potential impact of being killed on the battlefield per se. It's just a matter of me doing my part and feeling that I must contribute as an American to the overall safety of our country. When I reflect back on 9/11, I'm thinking of all the changes that have happened as a result of the last 10 years. The world is a very dangerous place. I can attest to that with my service in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's extremely unfortunate what happened on that day, but I truly believe that we are more security conscious as a result of that horrific Tuesday morning. And I believe that we have learned a great deal because it was a very small group of men that really paralyzed our country. We owe it to those that have lost their lives, either on 9/11 or in Iraq or Afghanistan. I think we need to pray for them, encourage their families, and just remember them each and every day for the sacrifice they made. I encourage all Americans to remember them, not just on Memorial Day or Veterans Day, but just think about the sacrifice they made.
My name is Judy. The morning of 9/11, I remember I was at home. I was watching TV, but I wasn't watching the local channels. I was watching a cable channel. And my son called me, and he was very upset. He asked me if I was watching TV, and I said yes. And he said, he said, you need to turn it on the local channel. And he said, I can't talk right now. He said, I can't talk right now. I was a flight attendant for American Airlines at that time. One of them was an American Airlines flight. Well, I had a lot of friends that flew for American at that time, and they lived up in that area. So, at that point, I wasn't sure, if any of them were on any of those flights or not. It was like I couldn't believe it was actually happening. It was like it was a dream or something, that it couldn't actually be happening. I was based in Dallas, but I was working a lot out of New York and Boston and Miami, a lot of different places. And so I could have very easily been on one of those flights. It's hard to explain how I feel. I mean, I cared for my family, but I think I have a deeper feeling now There were a lot of things going on between my son and I just, and I think that if something had have happened to me and we hadn't made things right ahead of time, that, that would have been a bad thing.
My name is Greg Hopper, Sugar Land Fire Department Lieutenant. This is Station 1 where I'm stationed out of now. I've been here 17 years, just a little over 17 years. September 11th, it was a Tuesday morning. I was actually at work at Station 3 at the time. And one of the guys' wives actually called and said, hey, airplane just hit one of the Trade Center towers. And we thought she was kidding or it was a joke or something. We didn't know what was going on. So just like everybody else, turned on TV, and just a couple of minutes after we turned on the TV, the second plane hit, and all of a sudden, it's obvious that it wasn't an accident. And, just by nature of the job, that things like that don't happen twice. I was a member of the Texas Task Force team, which is part of FEMA Urban Search and Rescue. And of course, my battalion chief called me immediately. He said, "Are you leaving?" I said, "Well, I haven't had a call yet." And then within 45 minutes, I got a page on our pagers that was requesting us to respond. And so I called him back immediately and told him that I was leaving. The site, we called it the pile every day. TV didn't do it justice. As you walked through the buildings that were still standing, and as those buildings opened up and you saw the pile, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like I said, TV, the cameras just didn't do it justice. It was enormous. It's hard to describe the pride of being there. Sometimes outweighs the gore that we saw. Before we left, our team was a 62-person team, and before we left out of Austin Bergstrom Airport, there was the governor was there were other dignitaries there, and one of the things they said was, look, there's 22 million people in Texas that want to go, which are the only 62 that are allowed to. When I look back, it's different. Sometimes when I first got back, it was, there was a lot of sadness. Nobody should have to see anything like that. Now I still have bouts of thinking about the horrible part of it. But then I also think about the pride, like we talked about. I love the fact that I was able to go there, and that people care about my story and then share other stories. I hear multiple stories about, I was in New York that day, or I was there the week before, or I stood on top of the towers at the observation deck, just a month before that, or I was supposed to go the next week, or whatever it may be. Everybody has a story. The worst thing you can do when somebody does give their life for something like that is to let it be in vain. If the fact that those firemen going up, or even the people that voluntarily went up, just the average citizen who tried to help, don't ever forget them. Their families are still here. Those people have children that are growing up to be firefighters just because of that. Probably the hardest part for me going to New York was I had a four-month-old son at the time, and leaving him for, at the time we didn't know for how long, and being gone for that whole time, and he was too young to be able to even talk to on the phone, so it was very difficult. But there's a lot of pride now, because when he sees this stuff on TV, he asks questions, and he knows what I did. It means a lot. The paycheck you get every couple of weeks has nothing to do with why people give their lives, or at least risk their lives to protect ours. So thank you is the biggest thing I can say.